Today on TimesCast, with protests spreading across the Middle East, the United States dictates a different diplomatic strategy for its friends and its foes.
Each country is different. Each country has its own traditions.
And op-ed columnist Nicholas D. Kristof witnesses a street funeral of a protester killed in Tuesday's clashes in Bahrain.
The peace change of the authorities, that's what we demand.
Protests heat up across the Middle East, reaching Libya, which has been ruled for 4 decades by Colonel Muammar Gaddafi. In Yemen, police tighten security around the capital as street battles between pro- and anti-government protesters continue for the 6th day. In the Iraqi city of Kut, police fired on demonstrators, killing 3 people who were calling for the resignation of the provincial governor. In Iran, students at Tehran University clashed over the death of a protester. And in Bahrain, protests grew as demonstrators gathered in Manama's Pearl Square for a 3rd day to demand democratic reforms from the monarchy. As protests continue across the region, the United States is taking a country-by-country approach to diplomacy. David Sanger has more from Washington.
President Obama has urged the protesters in Bahrain to be peaceful, and he's urged the Bahraini government to allow peaceful protest. But quietly, they have sent U.S. emissaries there and urged that Bahrain make the kind of political openings and changes that President Mubarak failed to make. And they're using his example to say, this isn't a long-term project. This isn't like you've got 6 months or a year or 2 years to work these issues out. You need to do it now. It's interesting that you've seen 2 different categories in the Obama administration's treatment of these protests around the Middle East. In friendly countries to the United States, Bahrain's an example, Jordan's another example, Yemen is another. The warnings that President Obama has issued have been to the governments, and it has been, you've got to get ahead of the curve, you've got to give these protesters what they want, you need to open up your societies.
We have sent a strong message to our allies in the region saying, let's look at Egypt's example as opposed to Iran's example.
In the case of Iran, and to some degree Syria, but mostly Iran, the message has been to the protesters, which has basically been, keep at it. Egypt was an alternative narrative, an alternative model that shows that these states, these authoritarian states, may be more fragile than they look. So it has been all but encouragement in the Iran case for the protesters to keep going on. That's a little bit dangerous for the U.S. because the Iranian military and the police in Iran have shown that they are more than willing to do what the Egyptians would not do, which is fire into a crowd. And so President Obama does not want to be left in the position where it looks like the U.S. is going to provide some kind of backing that he can't provide for an indigenous opposition movement.
I'm here to be with my brothers and my sisters. We want democracy. We want a free country.
Dictators seem to have trouble learning their lessons. One of the issues in Tunisia and in Egypt was that crackdowns just created a backlash, created more antagonism toward the government. Here in Bahrain, the government did the same thing. It had staged a brutal crackdown, and this is a funeral for one of those people who was killed. There are so many people out here who have been just enraged by that killing and are saying they'll continue to march and demand the overthrow of the regime. In the United States, some people are worried that the result of this movement might be a hardcore Islamic republic like Iran. What do you say about that issue?
I can't say this. Absolutely, this is not true. Because the people here are demanding democracy, human rights demands, and respecting people's choices. The peace change of the authorities, that's what we demand.
We want to live in democracy. They are pretending that we have democracy and we're not.
Join us again tomorrow for TimesCast.